The arrival of the Ikar. The air was thick with tension as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over a war-torn earth. In the distance, colossal shapes loomed against the fiery sky. Massive alien war machines known as the Ikar had arrived. Their presence sent ripples of dread through the remnants of humanity, who had fought valiantly but were now weary from years of conflict. The Ikar invasion. Commander Kinnock stood at the forefront, his four eyes scanning the battlefield with a predatory gaze. His blue-gray skin shimmered under the fading light, reflecting an otherworldly brilliance that contrasted sharply with the scorched earth beneath him. For years, his kind had studied this planet. Their advanced technology had analyzed its resources, its weaknesses, and most importantly, its dominant species, humans. They believed they understood humanity's psychology well enough to predict their reactions in times of crisis. Yet, as he observed the ragtag assembly of soldiers preparing for battle below him, doubt began to creep into his mind. These humans were not scattering in fear as he had anticipated. Instead, they stood resolute, rifles clutched tightly in their hands. Their faces were etched with grim determination, a sight that was both puzzling and infuriating to Kinnock. "Prepare for initial bombardment," he commanded his troops, his mandibles clicking in anticipation. He expected swift victory. After all, they had faced countless worlds before this one. Fear had always been their greatest ally in combat. But here on this desolate plain of shattered dreams, something felt different. Introduction to humanity's last line of defense. Captain Mark Briggs emerged from behind a makeshift barricade, barking orders to his men with unwavering confidence. His voice cut through the cacophony of war like a beacon in the dark. "Hold the line. Don't give them an inch." His words ignited a fire within his soldiers, an unyielding spirit that even Kinnock could sense from afar. Among them was Private Jackson, barely 18 years old and fresh out of training. His heart raced as he gripped his rifle tightly, sweat trickling down his brow. He had enlisted out of a sense of duty, but now found himself facing unimaginable horrors. As explosions rocked the ground around him, he felt fear clawing at his insides, but pushed it down with sheer willpower. "Stay focused," Sergeant Morales shouted beside him, a grizzled veteran whose face bore scars from countless battles. "Aim for their joints and eyes. That's where they're vulnerable." Jackson nodded stiffly, swallowing hard as he adjusted his aim toward an advancing Ikar warrior. The first clash. Suddenly, plasma fire erupted from the Ikar front lines, searing through the air with deadly precision. The human soldiers ducked and weaved amidst chaos while returning fire with their ballistic weapons. Far less advanced but lethal nonetheless, Jackson squeezed the trigger with trembling hands. Bullets flew toward their target as explosions tore through the battlefield. In that moment, time seemed to slow for Jackson. He watched in disbelief as one bullet struck an exposed joint on an alien soldier. It stumbled back in pain. Encouraged by Sergeant Morales' shouts, he fired again and hit an alien's eye squarely. Blue blood splattered across the ground as it collapsed in agony. Kinnock observed this scene with growing frustration. These humans were fighting back ferociously. They displayed a primal intensity that he had never encountered before, a desperation that fueled their resistance against overwhelming odds the human spirit shines through. As artillery opened up from behind human lines, hurling shells with deafening booms, the battlefield transformed into a grotesque ballet of death. Explosions sent debris flying in all directions while screams filled the air, a haunting symphony that resonated through both human and alien ranks alike. Mortar teams concentrate fire on their center, Captain Briggs commanded as he surveyed the chaos unfolding before him. Riflemen, keep up pressure. Show these bastards what it means to mess with Earth. His orders rallied his troops. They redoubled their efforts despite suffering heavy losses themselves. The air thickened with smoke and acrid scents. Burning metal mingled with sweat and blood as both sides fought tooth and nail for survival. Kinnock felt doubt gnawing at him. These humans were proving to be formidable adversaries, unlike any he had faced before. Their refusal to retreat or surrender defied all logic. Each moment spent resisting seemed to embolden them further. A momentary respite. As fighting continued throughout that harrowing day, the sun rose higher into its arc above, casting golden rays across fields littered with debris and bodies alike. Both sides took stock amidst chaos surrounding them, losses mounting yet spirits, unbroken on either side, fueled by desperation or pride, depending upon perspective, held by each warrior involved in this brutal struggle for survival. For Captain Briggs, and those fighting alongside him, it became clear that this was not just about territory anymore. It was about something far more profound. Survival against all odds, a testament forged through bloodshed, illuminating what it truly meant to be human when faced with extinction at hands of foreign invaders, seeking conquest without mercy nor understanding whatsoever. And so they fought on. A turning point. The battlefield lay in ruins, a haunting testament to the ferocity of the conflict that had unfolded. Smoke curled into the sky, mingling with the acrid scent of burnt metal and flesh, while the cries of the wounded echoed like a ghostly chorus. Captain Mark Briggs stood amidst the chaos, his heart pounding in his chest as he surveyed the aftermath of the brutal clash. The humans had fought valiantly, but at a heavy cost. Aftermath of battle. As dawn broke over the horizon, casting a pale light on the devastation, Briggs felt a mix of pride and sorrow wash over him. His soldiers were battered and bruised, many lying motionless on the ground, their sacrifice etched into the very fabric of this war-torn landscape. Yet, amidst the destruction, there was a flicker of hope, an undeniable spirit that refused to be extinguished. "Gather around," Briggs called, his voice steady despite the weight of grief pressing down on him. Slowly, his remaining men formed a circle around him, their faces grim but resolute. "We've suffered losses that will haunt us forever," he began, his gaze sweeping across their weary faces. "But we've also shown them what it means to fight for our home." Sergeant Morales stepped forward, bloody but unbowed. "We held our ground against overwhelming odds. We've made them bleed." His words ignited a spark in the hearts of those gathered. They had not only survived but had inflicted pain upon their oppressors. Planning for survival. Briggs continued, "We need to regroup and plan our next move. The Ikar will not rest. They'll come at us again with everything they have." He paused for a moment to let his words sink in before adding, "But we have something they don't, our will to survive." Private Jackson stood at the edge of the group, his legs still throbbing from injury, but his spirit unbroken. "What can we do?" "They're stronger and more numerous," he asked, his voice tinged with desperation. "We'll use their strength against them," Briggs replied, a determined gleam in his eye. "We'll set traps and ambushes. We know this terrain better than they do." Morales nodded in agreement. "We can lure them into narrow passages where their numbers won't count for much." "Exactly," Briggs said, feeling a surge of confidence as he laid out their plan. "We'll make them pay for every inch they try to take from us." The calm before the storm. As preparations began, an uneasy calm settled over the battlefield. Soldiers worked tirelessly to fortify their positions, digging trenches deeper, stacking debris for cover, and setting up makeshift barricades. The atmosphere was charged with anticipation. Everyone knew that another assault was imminent. Jackson found himself working alongside Sergeant Morales as they reinforced a barricade near the front lines. "You fought well out there," Morales said, glancing at Jackson with newfound respect. "I just did what I had to do," Jackson replied modestly. "Don't sell yourself short," Morales insisted. "You've got guts, more than most I've seen in my time." Jackson felt a swell of pride at Morales's words. He was beginning to understand what it meant to be part of something greater than himself, a brotherhood forged in fire and blood. The Ikar's relentless advance. Meanwhile, Commander Kinnock seethed with rage as he surveyed the battlefield from his command post. The losses suffered by his forces were unacceptable. These humans had proven themselves far more resilient than he had anticipated. He could feel doubt creeping into his thoughts, a feeling he had never experienced before. Preparing for battle. As dusk approached again, Captain Briggs gathered his men for a briefing under the dim light of makeshift lamps. "Tonight will be crucial," he began. "The E-car will attack at any moment. We need to be ready for anything." He laid out their defenses on a makeshift map drawn in dirt, a series of trenches and barricades designed to funnel enemy forces into kill zones where they could maximize their firepower. "Remember your training," Briggs continued, looking each soldier in the eye. "Aim for their joints and eyes. Those are their weak points." A murmur of agreement rippled through the group as they prepared themselves mentally for what lay ahead. The first wave. Just as night fell, an ominous rumble echoed across the battlefield. The sound of E-car war machines advancing once more. The ground shook beneath their weight as Captain Briggs signaled for silence among his troops. "Hold your fire until they're in range," he commanded, heart pounding in anticipation. The soldiers lined up behind barricades, rifles poised and ready. As the alien forces drew closer, massive silhouettes illuminated by sporadic explosions, Briggs felt an adrenaline rush surge through him. "Now," he shouted as he raised his rifle. A storm of bullets erupted from human positions as soldiers unleashed hell upon their foes. The air crackled with energy as plasma bolts flew overhead, illuminating faces filled with grim determination. Facing overwhelming odds, the E-car advanced relentlessly, but humanity fought back with everything they had left. Private Jackson found himself back at the forefront of battle despite his injury. Each shot fired felt like a small victory against insurmountable odds. "Push them back," Morales yelled as he led a charge against an advancing squadron of E-car infantry. The humans fought fiercely. Hand-to-hand combat erupted in brutal clashes as fists met exoskeletons. Jackson ducked under an alien swing and fired at point-blank range into an exposed joint. The creature staggered back before collapsing in a heap. Around him, chaos reigned supreme. The sounds of gunfire mixed with shouts and screams formed a cacophony that echoed across the battlefield like a haunting melody. A glimmer of hope. As hours passed in relentless combat, fatigue began to set in among both sides, but neither would yield ground easily. Captain Briggs rallied his men again amidst heavy fighting. They were losing soldiers, but gaining ground inch by bloody inch. "Stay strong. We're holding them," he shouted over the din of battle. His words resonated through the ranks. Even amidst despair, hope flickered like embers waiting to ignite into flames once more. Then came an unexpected turn. The E-car forces began to falter under pressure as human artillery rained down upon them from hidden positions behind barricades that had been hastily constructed during lulls in fighting. "Keep it up. Don't let them regroup," Morales yelled as he fired into an advancing wave of aliens. Jackson found himself at Morales' side again. Despite exhaustion weighing heavily on him, adrenaline fueled his movements as he fired again and again into enemy ranks, each shot feeling like an act of defiance against oppression. The turning point. As dawn approached once more, a blood-red hue painting the sky, Briggs sensed something shifting within both camps. Humanity's spirit was unyielding, while E-car morale wavered under relentless assault from below. In that moment, a realization washed over him. They could win this fight if only they held fast against despair long enough for reinforcements or some miracle to arrive. But Kenox was not one to accept defeat lightly. Observing from afar through tactical screens displaying live feeds from battle zones, he felt rage boiling within him at this unexpected resilience displayed by mere humans who dared defy an advanced race like theirs. "Reinforce our front lines. We will crush them," he bellowed angrily at his officers who scrambled to comply with renewed urgency, determined not to let another day slip away without claiming victory over these tenacious creatures who refused to bow down before superior power. A momentary respite. As night fell over the battlefield, a quiet blanket muffling sounds of anguish. The remaining soldiers huddled around makeshift command posts illuminated by flickering lights. Captain Briggs gathered his weary men together. Fatigue hung heavily in their eyes, but was overshadowed by grim determination. "Listen up," Briggs said firmly, cutting through murmurs that threatened to drown out hope. "We've got a short window to regroup before they come back at us harder than ever." He paused for effect before continuing. "We need to hold this position no matter what." Sergeant Morales leaned forward intently. "What about reinforcements? Any word from HQ?" Briggs shook his head solemnly. Communications were still down. They were on their own now more than ever before. "Private Jackson," he said suddenly, turning toward him. "Do you have any ideas on how we can disrupt their buildup?" Jackson's mind raced. They needed a plan. Something bold enough to buy them precious time against an enemy that underestimated them at every turn. A dangerous plan. Briggs contemplated for a moment before speaking again. "It's risky but might just work." He looked around at his men. Each face reflected both fear and resolve, a testament to humanity's spirit against insurmountable odds. "Morales," he instructed decisively, "take a squad and see if you can infiltrate their lines tonight. Plant charges on anything that looks important." Morales nodded grimly, determination etched into every line on his face. "Consider it done." With that command given, a sense of purpose surged through them all, a flicker of hope amidst despair as they prepared for what lay ahead. As darkness enveloped them like an old friend hiding secrets beneath its cloak, these brave souls ventured forth into unknown territory, armed only with courage and desperation, their hearts beating not just for survival, but also for something greater, freedom from tyranny. In this defining moment where humanity stood poised at a precipice between annihilation or resurgence, their story was only just beginning. The human resistance, the dawn of a new day broke over the battlefield, casting a surreal glow on the remnants of the previous night's carnage. Captain Mark Briggs stood amidst the wreckage, surveying the scene with a mixture of pride and sorrow. The air was thick with the acrid scent of smoke and burnt metal, mingling with the metallic tang of blood that soaked the ground. His soldiers, weary yet unbroken, gathered around him, their faces marked by soot and determination. Rallying the troops. "Listen up," Briggs shouted, his voice cutting through the haze of despair. "We've held our ground against overwhelming odds, but this fight is far from over. The Ikar will come at us again, and we need to be ready." His words resonated with the soldiers. They had seen what they were capable of when pushed to their limits. Sergeant Morales stepped forward, his face grim but resolute. "We need to fortify our defenses. If they're regrouping, we can expect them to hit us hard. We need to dig in and prepare for their next wave." Briggs nodded in agreement. "We'll set up barricades and reinforce our positions. Every soldier here has proven their worth. Now it's time to show these aliens that humanity isn't just a fleeting spark. We're a raging inferno." As his men sprang into action, Briggs felt a flicker of hope ignite within him. They were battered but not broken. Each soldier was a testament to human resilience. The Ikar's counteroffensive. Meanwhile, Commander Kinox observed from his command post, frustration boiling within him. The humans had exceeded his expectations. They fought with a ferocity he had not anticipated. He had assumed that their primitive weapons would crumble before the might of the Ikar war machines, yet here they stood, unyielding. "Prepare for another assault," he ordered his officers, his voice cold and commanding. "We will crush them this time." His 4 eyes glinted with determination as he plotted their next move. The Ikar forces began to regroup, their advanced technology allowing them to quickly assess their losses and strategize anew. Kinox knew that fear was a powerful weapon. He intended to use it against humanity once more. Private Jackson's growth. In the heart of the human camp, Private Jackson sat nursing his wounds. His leg throbbed painfully where an alien round had struck him during the chaos of the previous night's battle. He watched as his fellow soldiers moved about with purpose, some digging trenches while others reinforced barricades. "Hey, you're not going to just sit there all day, are you?" Sergeant Morales approached him with a raised eyebrow. Jackson forced a smile despite the pain. "I'm just catching my breath." Morales knelt beside him and placed a hand on Jackson's shoulder. "You've done well out there, but we need every hand on deck if we're going to hold this position. Prepare for another assault." Canucks barked at his officers. "We will crush them this time. They cannot withstand our might forever." His voice was filled with fury as he plotted their next move. The Ikar forces began to regroup once more, their advanced technology allowing them to quickly assess their losses and strategize anew. Canucks knew that fear was a powerful weapon. He intended to use it against humanity once more. Setting traps. As dusk fell again over the battlefield, Briggs and his men worked feverishly to set traps along likely paths of Ikar advance. They rigged explosives hidden beneath piles of debris and positioned snipers in elevated positions overlooking key routes. "Stay sharp," Briggs reminded them as they prepared for what lay ahead. "When they come charging in, we need to be ready." The night wore on slowly. Tension hung thick in the air like an impending storm. Each soldier felt it, the knowledge that soon they would face their enemy once more. The Ikar counterattack begins. At dawn's first light, an ominous rumble echoed across the landscape, the sound of Ikar war machines advancing once more. The ground shook beneath their weight as Captain Briggs signaled for silence among his troops. "Hold your fire until they're in range," he commanded, heart pounding in anticipation. As the alien forces drew closer, massive silhouettes illuminated by sporadic explosions, Briggs felt an adrenaline rush surge through him. "Now," he shouted as he raised his rifle. A storm of bullets erupted from human positions as soldiers unleashed hell upon their foes. The air crackled with energy as plasma bolts flew overhead, while human artillery opened up from behind barricades, hurling shells with deafening booms that tore through Ikar ranks. A desperate fight. The battle erupted into chaos once more. Explosions rocked the ground as both sides fought tooth and nail for survival. Private Jackson found himself back at the forefront despite his injury. Each shot fired felt like a small victory against insurmountable odds. "Push them back," Morales yelled as he led a charge against an advancing squadron of Ikar infantry. The humans fought fiercely. Hand-to-hand combat erupted in brutal clashes as fists met exoskeletons. Jackson ducked under an alien swing and fired at point-blank range into an exposed joint. The creature staggered back in pain before collapsing in a heap, as artillery opened up from behind human lines. Hurling shells with deafening booms, the battlefield transformed into a grotesque ballad of death once again. The turning point. Hours passed in relentless combat. Fatigue began to set in among both sides, but neither would yield ground easily. Captain Briggs rallied his men again amidst heavy fighting. They were losing soldiers but gaining ground inch by bloody inch. "Stay strong. We're holding them," he shouted over the din of battle. Then came an unexpected turn. The Ikar forces began to falter under pressure as human artillery rained down upon them from hidden positions behind barricades hastily constructed during lulls in fighting. "Keep it up. Don't let them regroup," Morales yelled as he fired into an advancing wave of aliens. A momentary respite. As night fell over the battlefield, a quiet blanket muffling sounds of anguish. The remaining soldiers huddled around makeshift command posts illuminated by flickering lights. Captain Briggs gathered his weary men together. Fatigue hung heavily in their eyes, but was overshadowed by grim determination. "Listen up," Briggs said firmly, cutting through murmurs that threatened to drown out hope. "We've got a short window to regroup before they come back at us harder than ever." He laid out their defenses on a makeshift map drawn in dirt. A series of trenches and barricades designed to funnel enemy forces into kill zones where they could maximize their firepower. "Remember your training," Briggs continued, looking each soldier in the eye. "Aim for their joints and eyes. Those are their weak points." A murmur of agreement rippled through the group as they prepared themselves mentally for what lay ahead. The final stand. As dawn approached once more, a blood-red hue painting the sky, Briggs sensed something shifting within both camps. Humanity's spirit was unyielding, while Icar morale wavered under relentless assault from below. In that moment, a realization washed over him. They could win this fight if only they held fast against despair long enough for reinforcements or some miracle to arrive. But Kinox was not one to accept defeat lightly. Observing from afar through tactical screens displaying live feeds from battle zones, he felt rage boiling within him at this unexpected resilience displayed by mere humans who dared defy an advanced race like theirs seeking conquest without mercy nor understanding whatsoever. And so they fought on. In this defining moment where humanity stood poised at a precipice between annihilation or resurgence, their story was only just beginning.